For legal reasons, this video is based on publicly available court documents, records, and transcripts of the people involved. Now in 2013, Agent Rodney of the Homeland Security was asked, what was the strangest investigation he'd ever been on? Two words came to mind: the Coyote Bros. You see, in 2011, a group of frat bros trying to make some extra cash came up with an ingenious idea. Why don't we smuggle illegal aliens to pay for our college? After getting contracts out with the cartel, getting stash houses set up all across Texas, and recruiting dozens of students under the guise of a transportation service for undocumented workers, within a year, they would smuggle over 1,000 people. They were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. But unfortunately, it would be one little thing that would bring the entire operation down. And for Agent Rodney, it would become the most bizarre Border Patrol investigation he has ever seen in his 15-year career. This is the real-life story of the Coyote Bros, when a partying, loving frat smuggling people to pay for your college. Probably the most American thing there possibly is. Now, as a broke 25-year-old club photographer, Max Bocanegra was your typical frat bro. He loved drugs, he loved partying, but most off, he loved making that easy money. Now, working at the clubs on the weekends, he was always fascinated by those guys who just threw around cash like it was nothing in the air, and always hoping to find the secret to make that kind of money. He always asked these guys what they did for work, but honestly, their answers were kind of disappointing. But that night at the club, Miguel caught his eye, throwing hundreds in the air, buying bottles all around, handing out key bumps to the hottest chicks in the club. And as Max walked up to him and asked the question, what do you do for work? Miguel said, human trafficking. Now, while the whole thing kind of seemed like a joke, Miguel did have a clothing brand, and wouldn't you know it, he needed a photographer for an upcoming photo shoot. So as Max and Miguel exchanged numbers that night, Max, he was excited for the photo shoot gig, but more excited to learn what the hell this Miguel guy actually did for money. That week in an empty warehouse downtown, the photo shoot went flawlessly. The clothing was cool, the model seemed hot, but when four Honduran nationals showed up unannounced on the photo shoot, that's when Max learned this guy wasn't kidding. This whole clothing brand was just a front for him to clean his cash, because Miguel was a certified human trafficker. Now, Max had been desperate to move up in the world. He begged Miguel to get in any way he could, because while Max didn't have any experience in the criminal arts or hell even speak Spanish, he had one thing going for him: the hustle. But who was Miguel? Now, his family had a small smuggling ring that contracted out with the cartels. The cartels would bring the illegals over the border, and Miguel's family would take people past the immigration checkpoints within the United States. Now, these checkpoints are gnarly to get through. Millions of dollars are put in by the government, dozens of agents, helicopters in the sky with cameras looking all around. And Miguel's family got paid to smuggle people past that. Now, the benefit to smuggling like this is that if you're the cartel bringing people over the border, if you get caught, there's really no excuse to get you out of that one. But if you're taking illegals through the United States like Miguel's family did, well, you just tell the cops, "Oh, officer, I didn't know they were illegal immigrants. I just picked up some hitchhikers." And as long as you had less than 6 of them, you get let off every time. Now, Max was intrigued. It seemed less risky, it paid pretty well, and the ramifications of getting caught just really weren't that extreme. And after convincing his family that this white guy Max could possibly work hard as a coyote, Max was hired on by Miguel's family for his first smuggling run. As they headed from Corpus Christi to Falfurrias, Texas, in the middle of nowhere was a ranch house, a chicken coop, and a trailer filled with dozens of illegals, shaved Mexicanos listening on police scanners, all in the house. To Max, he had never seen anything like this. He had grown up middle class. This whole thing, to him, felt like a goddamn movie set. Rounding up the illegals in his car, Miguel laid out some of the basic rules of the game and the itinerary of the trip. Now, while the drive from Falfurrias, Texas, where they were at, up to Houston, Texas, would normally be about an hour and a half, to get by the immigration checkpoint, their route would be about 5 hours in total. Miguel said always put the whitest Mexican in the front seat. He said always drive at night. And he said always carry a bottle of Febreze with you, which kind of seemed a little bit weird. But when Max had shotgun in the car, it made all sense. And as Miguel dusted the car off in Febreze, it made the smell at least a little bit more bearable. So sitting shotgun with 3 illegals in the back, they all took off. And Miguel laid out why was this trip so goddamn long. Now, Miguel said you got to think of Border Patrol checkpoints as like you're driving drunk and you see a DUI stop up ahead. Now, obviously trying to drive through it is a really dumb idea. Even trying to take the street over isn't a smart one either. So to get by an immigration checkpoint that has millions of dollars put in by the government, you can't just take the next side street or even freeway over. You have to go all the way around. and the route they were taking involved secret roads in the middle of nowhere, but the drive to Houston, Texas, the trafficking hub of the United States, was totally worth it. Miguel was paid out $6,000 in cash and threw a couple hundred to Max just for the ride-along. It was the easiest money Max had ever made. And Max, he was hooked. Under the direction of Miguel, Max started driving every night he could, picking up the illegals at sunset, heading up to Houston, Texas with a gallon of Febreze in his car. Making $500 per illegal he drove, Max started making more money than he had ever made in his entire life. Soon he bought new Jordans, shoes, an apartment, hell, even a new laptop and even a nicer car to drive. It was as if Max discovered the real-life money glitch for his own life. But during these long drives on the highway all by himself, lonely late at night, his conscience would often slip, and he thought about what he was exactly doing. He was trafficking human beings, one of the most disgusting things you can do, to just buy a new pair of Jordans. But with thousands burning a hole in his pocket, who cared? Max started partying every night that he could. Hell, even had a new habit right now. After dropping the illegals off in Houston, Max would go to the strip club, get domed up in the VIP room, and head back home after. The perfect after-work activity to truly unwind. It was all I wanted to do, Max said, and Max saw the potential within this business. Now, there was a huge benefit to Miguel running this very small family smuggling ring. It gave him an incredibly low profile. They'd been doing this for over a decade, completely undetected by Border Patrol. But while the smuggling ring ran pretty small, it did make decent money. But Max, as an outsider, saw the potential within the human trafficking business. If they only had more drivers like himself, how much more money could be made? The thousands of dollars that were left on the table. Now, Max, thinking like a real startup bro in 2012, had been inspired by the Steve Jobs biography. He told Miguel he needed to adopt a growth mindset. How many people come in the USA legally? Millions? That's a pretty big customer base. This whole human trafficking ring, it could 10x itself.
10x your money?
See, Max wanted to turn Miguel's small family-owned smuggling ring and almost turn it into a startup. Now, the idea was Max would recruit kids at local Texas A&M parties, hand out free bottles of Grey Goose, blow, tabs of acid, all types of drugs, and once the kids were so impressed and they asked the question to Max, "Hey man, what do you do for work?" Max would lay on the spiel of this opportunity of a lifetime. A transportation service for undocumented workers. Now, this kind of worked out two ways. It would weed out the kids who obviously knew better than this, that it seemed like some Ponzi scheme or whatever, and the ones dumb enough to believe Max was really selling what he was, well, they'd be perfect to be convinced to human traffic. Now, per the plan, Max would do a quick training with the drivers, get him up to speed, they would do a few runs, make a couple grand, and then Max would never work with that driver ever again. And the benefit of that is that Border Patrol couldn't pin down any one driver for doing all of these runs. Honestly, it was pretty genius, really. But the real paradigm shift for Max's idea, the one that no other Mexican smuggling operation could even compete with, all of the drivers would be white. Because let's be honest, who's Border Patrol more likely to pull over? A white kid driving a brand new Kia with some tinted windows and some people in the back? Or a Mexican guy driving an '84 Camry with some missing hubcaps and 17 illegals sagging in the back? Let's be honest with ourselves. The Mexican guy. But Miguel was resistant to what he called these gringo ideas. I mean, what the hell did this white kid Max know about the game? His family had been doing this for over a decade undetected. Something must have been going right. But like an earworm day by day,
there's an earworm in my brain.
Miguel slowly became convinced that it would be the Uber of human trafficking. It was genius. Although Miguel had to convince one last person in the operation. It was the baddest, scariest mofo in the game, the one who truly ran this whole thing, Miguel's mom. And she only had one piece of advice for him. Be careful with these white people, they'll tell on you. They're rats. And she did give him the stamp of approval. Did you know that the FDA is removing fluoride supplements off of the market? I had no idea either until I used Ground News, and specifically their blind spot report. Now, Ground News is an aggregator that gives you the factuality of your news sources and also who owns it, so you could figure out what are their incentives as well. Now, I found this story using their blind spot report, which shows you the stories that aren't being covered by the left or not even being covered by the right. And this whole story of the fluoride being gone, which is totally real by the way, totally went under my radar. If you want to follow more of this story, scan this QR code right here and stock up on that toothpaste. Now, I've been using their blind spot report for a couple of months now, and I love how it just shows you which stories get totally slipped by you. And it's good to see a good factual perspective of the news rather than this algorithm wormhole where you're really fed clickbait titles and you have no choice about what news you're looking at. So if you want to up your media diet, get your news game up on deck, go to ground.news/Vince to get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is the same plan I use. Now, Miguel was young, dumb, and just full of confidence. He felt like he could spot a rat from a mile away, and that definitely wasn't Max. I mean, what the hell did his mom know about this anyway? So they went on, and soon they got to work on their recruitment plan for the expansion. Now, the business would go something like this. Miguel's family would be paid out $2,000 per illegal they drove up north. Miguel would pay out $500 to Max, and then Max would pay out $300 to a driver who made the trip. Basically, Max would make $200 per an illegal for essentially middlemaning human trafficking. He would just have to coordinate the trip, train up the driver, and make $200 per person. I gotta give it to the guy. That's pretty goddamn genius. But who would be employee number one, you might ask? Well, Max already had him in mind, Steven Sluter. Now, Steven was a college kid who had just gotten out of the military, and he was using his GI Bill to get his master's degree. And while the two were good friends, Steven had recently come upon hard times and was couch surfing at Max's apartment. And that's when Steven noticed Max's new life that he had was everything Steven wanted. He had a new car, he had a nice apartment. See, Steven knew Max was in this whole smuggling business and it seemed to be going pretty goddamn well for him. But when Max suggested he do his own smuggle run or two to maybe get his own apartment, Steven refused. The kid knew better. He had his military career, his college degree. It simply wasn't worth it to do that. So Max had another idea for him. Instead of couch surfing all around, he suggested he could stay at his friend Miguel's apartment. He was a local smuggler, he made good money, he lived close by, and the best part, he would charge him next to nothing. Now, with his life in his suitcase, Steven showed up at Miguel's house, ready to meet the supposed smuggler's roommate. Now, Max had vouched hard for the guy, heard really nice things, but when Steven opened up the door, a waft of Febreze just smacks him in the face. Underneath the one light bulb dangling from an extension cord, the carpets were stained and torn. And on the couch were 4 Honduran nationals watching.
This is stuff you can't get anywhere else. College co-eds and the Amish edition.
That's when Steven learned these weren't just roomies. These were illegal aliens Miguel was harboring from the United States of America.
We will find you, and we will deport you.
I guess that's why rent was so cheap then. That night, Miguel came home with tacos and beers for all, a little fiesta for the new roommate. But when Steven woke up the next morning, the Hondurans were adios. And through the week, he saw a slurry of people come by the house. One day it was Mexicans, Hondurans, Haitians, Venezuelans. Steven even learned little bits of Spanish. Now, what's funny is whenever Steven brought girls over to show him his model railroad collection, he always told them, don't worry about the people sleeping on the floor. That's my roommate's family visiting. Now, Miguel saw potential within Steven and every day tried to convince him to smuggle. Steven got along with the illegals, spoke a little bit of Spanish, and the best part, Steven had a clean-cut look that no cop would ever pull over. But every day he asked, Steven refused. He had way too much on the line to throw it away for something so dumb. But to help him out with his money struggles, Miguel started paying Steven $100 to babysit the illegal immigrants coming through the apartment. Because unbeknownst to Steven, well, all of these illegal aliens, they had debts to pay to Miguel's family before they could leave. Now, the next week hungover, Steven woke up after throwing a little fiesta with his new roommates. While all of the roommates were gone that morning, Steven's laptop that had his entire college life on there had been stolen by an illegal immigrant. Now, Steven was screwed. Everything he had was on that machine. But wouldn't you know it, when Miguel heard about this problem, he presented Steven the perfect opportunity to go buy a new one. Smuggling them illegals. Convincing himself this would be a one-time deal, Steven, Max, and Miguel went down to the ranch in Falfurrias because now the big boss was in town, and he wanted to meet Max's new employee, Steven. Now, like a grower is to a weed dealer, Gilbert Alvarella was the supplier of humans. A whitish Mexican, he bred roosters that fought, and oh boy, this guy loved doing blow. Now, Gilbert worked with the cartels to bring the illegals over the border, and they would be stashed at this house in Falfurrias. Now, at this stash house, which is in the United States, all of these illegals there could wait for days until their MoneyGram wires cleared with Miguel's family. And once those payments cleared, Miguel would take them from that ranch all the way to Houston, Texas, which is considered the trafficking hub of the United States. And from there, the illegals would go off to whichever city they want to. But this ranch in Falfurrias was no goddamn Hilton. In the summer, it would hit over 100 degrees. People would be shoved inside chicken coops when the space got too slim. Instead of a bathroom, were bottles of pee all around. And the stench of the thousands of people who would pass by was permanent in the walls. And while Max had convinced himself a long time ago that he was taking people out of this situation rather than putting them in it, to Steven, this whole thing was just horrifying, the inhumanity of these conditions. Nah, but this was Steven's first smuggling run. Hell, he needed the money really bad. Now, warning Steven not to take the main roads, they laid out the additional route, the additional 4 hours to the hour-and-a-half trip all the way up to Houston, Texas. But this time, Gilbert had hawks scattered along the road, basically hired heads with police scanners looking out for Border Patrol activity. Inching across the driveway with the car packed full of illegals, Max flagged Steven down and handed him a little bottle. "Here's some Febreze, homie." Sprayed on him like this. And he told him, "Congrats, you're officially running the beans." Now, throughout the trial, text messages would be revealed that showed they often used this kind of language to talk about what they were doing. "I'm so hungry I could eat more beans. I need more beaners. I'm officially running beans." You name it, they probably said it. I'm Mexican, so I guess I could say it, but this is the language that they use to talk about these people. Now, 4 hours later, pumped full of adrenaline, Steven had made the easiest money he had ever made in his life, $1,000. And while Steven was excited to pick up a MacBook the next day, he grew a little bit anxious about all of this. This easy money he was making could easily destroy his life. His military career, his college degree, everything could be down the shitter if he ever got caught. But there was that little voice in his head that told him this all wasn't as bad as he made it seem. Now, while Miguel said he was loyal to his family and the cartel and the smuggling ring, Miguel was often kind of a greedy little bitch. See, on the weekends, he would do these little smuggle runs on his own, little side quests, cutting out his family and the cartel. He would pick up illegals outside of Walmart and drive them up north for thousands of dollars. And while Miguel had done dozens of these side quests, this week when Miguel went to Walmart to pick up some illegals, he picked them up in his car, got handed over the cash, and wouldn't you know it, walked into a Border Patrol sting operation. And they found the worst thing he could possibly have on him, an unregistered loaded pistol. Now, by all measures, Miguel should have been. But here's how crazy smuggling was in 2012. They were so busy with all of the immigration cases and all of that they dropped all of Miguel's charges. Hell, even the gun charge he had as well. Now, Miguel took this as a sign to just keep a low profile and not actually do the smuggling anymore, but really listen to what Max said, keep that growth mindset, and just expand the smuggling operation. Now, it was such a close call, Steven moved out of Miguel's and got a baller apartment with Max, all paid for by human trafficking. Now, like a bottom house sorority girl recruiting pledges, Max went all around town finding desperate teenagers willing to traffic illegals to pay for their college. You know, like the most American thing there possibly is. At all of the frat parties stocked with plastic bottles of vodka, Max would show up with the case of Grey Goose and free drugs for all. Now, in Max, knowing what it felt like to be in that position of so desperate to do anything to get ahead in life, knew how to manipulate these kids to the nth degree, all to get them to ask the question, "How are you making so much money, man? What do you do for work?" And Max would lay on the spiel. And one of those believers was Rhino, a sophomore at Texas A&M. Now, after smoking out of Max's the dankest OG he had ever smoked, the weed impressed him so much that it convinced them to traffic human beings. Through the weeks, they added a roster of drivers to their lineup. Their training got more refined. All you're doing is you're picking up people and driving. They're not illegals. They're just, they haven't had a shower in a while. They just lost their IDs. It's the people outside of Home Depot. But what sold Rhino above all else was he was making $300 per an illegal alien he drove, aka the easiest money he had ever made in his Mazda 3. Now, while the first rule of any illicit game is, keep a low profile, I guess Max never got the message. Talking the dudes, "Oh man, I'm a smuggler." Trying to impress a chick, "Oh man, I'm a smuggler." Strip club, "I'm a smuggler." And in this situation, the stripper was so impressed, she became Max's new girlfriend. I swear to God, it's always the stripper girlfriend when they start making money. Growth hacking the business, 24 drivers were now on the payroll. Solar panel salesmen, college kids, frat bros, ex-military, housewives, strippers, and hell, even masseuses. Close to 1,000 people were getting smuggled. Max was making 40 grand a month. Febreze, bought by the gallon. Over 50 bean runs a week. And by now, Max barely looked at these people as even humans, but more of just a commodity to be bought, sold, and traded. But with so many people in and out of the apartment, they kind of started having a little problem. One night, Max threw a party and had a bunch of people over, and when Max went in the back to make a phone call, 15 illegals came through the front door, and all of the girls' jaws dropped to the floor. And that's when Max learned he needed more space for more illegals. So like a good businessman, Max, thinking about the maximum profit motive he can do, suggested they get storage units and stuff them with empty water bottles and sleeping bags for them to stay in. But when Miguel heard of this, he was horrified, stating, "That's the first place the feds always look. That is some rookie." So Max, thinking like a Jeff Bezos, when he made his drivers wear diapers to make them do more delivery runs, told all of the drivers that if they wanted to work, the illegals had to stay at their homes. And all of the drivers complied. Max's advice had grown the small smuggling operation into a massive empire. Miguel was making a reported $100,000 a month. And that's when they all began to ball out of control. It was 2012. Party rock anthem was blasting on the JBL. People started buying Beamers, Benzes, Escalade, Jordans, Clicquot, Patron, wakeboard boats. The partying would never stop, as long as the illegals kept coming. But that's when the cracks began to show. While Steven was on a bean run with 5 illegals in the back, he had no idea where to drop them off at. He tried to get a hold of Max or Miguel, but no one picked up their phone. And as he circled around Houston for hours waiting for their call, Steven grew pissed and eventually drove back home with a car packed full of illegals. Now, this was because Max and Miguel were at the strip club and had gotten so drunk that they fell asleep while getting domed up in the VIP room. This whole thing was getting sloppy. It wasn't like transporting cargo. This is like full-on human beings. And Steven knew that a little up like this could mess the whole thing up. Soon it was the stripper, the housewife, the college kids, hell, even Max were getting pulled over by Border Patrol almost every week. But they all obeyed that golden rule, and they were let off every time. But every week, more and more drivers were getting pulled over by Border Patrol. Team morale began to crash, and this whole thing seemed almost targeted. And these people who had been so excited to work at first, who were making thousands of dollars, were dropping like flies. And even Steven, who had been with Max since day one, hell, he was even his roommate, threw in the towel and left the game. Max was devastated, beyond betrayed, because Steven was about to graduate and figured, well, I'm gonna go get a real job, quote unquote, and just use all of the money I made smuggling to hold myself off until then. Feeling lost and betrayed, Max vented to Miguel about all of these drivers getting spooked. But what the hell did he know? He'd never dealt with these employee problems before. This whole expansion was Max's idea anyway. So Miguel drives to Falfurrias to talk to the big boss Gilbert, get some advice maybe, or at the bare minimum, just tell him to slow down on the amount of illegals they need to smuggle. Rolling up to the ranch in Falfurrias, Miguel knocked on the torn screen door. Hearing Gilbert yell, "Hold on!" Miguel heard a coke sniffle from the back. Peeking inside, he saw shaved-headed Mexicanos listening to police scanners. It seemed like the operation was growing bigger. As Gilbert welcomed Miguel in, smearing the coke dust on his gums, Miguel began to rant about the problems. They couldn't smuggle this many people, his workers were getting spooked, and he didn't know what the hell to do. Gilbert rails another line, and as he stares at Miguel, he dials the phone and hands it over to him. "You're not stopping, SA. Make sure your drivers are good with the new routes. We're picking up Monday." "Who was that?" Miguel said. "You don't want to find out." Miguel knew his head would be on a tortoise real soon if he didn't get his act together. Passing the stress of getting chewed out down the line like some middle management company, Miguel told Max they weren't stopping in all hell. Find new routes, get new drivers, just get it goddamn done. And this wasn't even from him. It was from the big boss upstairs. But honestly to Max, this wasn't that big of a deal, because that weekend, Max had a trip planned out to Vegas, and there was no way in hell he was going to smuggle himself. You see, Max just needed to find one driver for that weekend. So contacting the entire crew, all of them just had other commitments that weekend. But when he doubles their pay, one driver decides to run up, and that was Jake Warner. Now, Jake Warner was a microbiology major, a white dude, he loved weed, he loved surfing, and he had decided to forego a party that weekend for double the pay on a bean run. So Max gave him the address, told him where to go, and flew out to Vegas in a heartbeat. And while Max had assumed that Jake Warner knew all the rules and wouldn't cut corners, Jake Warner would be the eventual downfall of this entire business. As the sun set, the pickup had gone perfect. Jake, liberating the illegals in his Jeep Liberty, was speeding down the freeway, and he was cutting corners to get to a party in time that night. But as he flew by a cop, he slammed on the brakes, trying to play cool. He wasn't speeding. He just saw something in the road. That was all. But once that red and blue were in his mirror, Jake knew there was no way out of this. Because Jake, he had cut some serious corners. Instead of taking the secret road that took an extra 5 hours, Jake took the main road, swarming with Border Patrol all over. Jake, being a little bit greedy, decided to take 6 illegals to make some extra cash. Jake was arrested and taken into custody. Now, Agent Hunter of the Department of Homeland Security assumed he had just caught a college kid trying to make some side cash. But as Jake tried to talk his way out of it, he revealed that it wasn't his thing. There was a man named Max in Falfurrias, Texas, and he was the ringleader of the entire operation. Agent Hunter even said, "I was actually surprised at how much information he was able to provide based on his limited role." Staking out Max's apartment, undercovers followed him all around town, and once they saw him drive to Falfurrias with his stripper girlfriend in tow, Border Patrol called in for backup. By the time he arrived at the ranch, dozens of sniper agents were hiding out in the brush. A dozen cop cars were swarming in. Max was caught red-handed, and oh boy, was he screwed. Now charged with smuggling 4 illegals, Max posted bail, lawyered up, and like an idiot, let police look through his phone without a warrant. And when Steven heard about this, oh boy, he felt like he had just dodged a bullet, leaving the game at literally the perfect time. Now, Steven had just graduated, he had moonwalked all across the stage, and while he felt bad that Max's life was now falling apart, he felt a little good that his life wasn't. But as Agent Hunter searched through Max's phone, he saw the name Steven Sluter over and over and over, and knew he was key to this entire operation. In a risky move, Agent Hunter left his business card at Steven's new apartment, requesting a little chit-chat. Now, anxious with how much Agent Hunter knew, he met him over at a local pizza joint, showing that he had nothing to hide. Agent Hunter asked him if he had ever been to Falfurrias, and Steven, caught like a deer in headlights, remembered the pee in bottles, the stench of the thousands who had traveled by, the gallons of Febreze in the building, and said, "I was big game hunting there in July, I think." And that's when Agent Hunter said the scariest words you could ever hear from a cop. "You're f***ed." Going through dozens of excuses in his head, he even told his attorney to tell Agent Hunter, "Tell him I was in Falfurrias, hooking up with a married chick, and I was too embarrassed to tell him about it." Yeah, the attorney dropped him right then and there. Steven knew he was going to have to backstab his friend to get out of this one, because Max and Miguel were the real guys he was going after. And wouldn't you know it, Steven would be the star witness in the trial. Warrants in hand, Max was arrested again, finding dozens of ledgers with physical descriptions of all of the people they had smuggled. Amping those 4 illegal smuggling charges, the conspiracy to smuggle over 100 illegal aliens. Pleading guilty, Max would get 40 months in prison. Miguel would get 44 months. And Steven, his charges were dropped, with Max stating, "Better to spend a few years as an inmate than the rest of your life knowing you're a bitch. Steven was my best friend, and he turned his back on me." Now today, Max has no regrets about what he did, stating in 2016, "If I knew I was going to get jail time, I would have done 100 people more. I would have done it a lot harder."